Good evening and welcome to NTD News. I'm Cindy Drucare. While Hurricane Dorian continues to batter South Carolina, the storm's death toll has now reached the U.S. mainland. 2 deaths in Florida and 1 in North Carolina have been reported, all involving men who were trimming trees or otherwise getting ready for the storm.
The medical examiner's office in Collier County, Florida, said a 38-year-old landscaper was electrocuted Saturday while trimming trees that had grown into power lines in preparation for the storm. Meanwhile, police in Ocoee, Florida, said 56-year-old Joseph Walden died Monday evening while sitting on a tree limb and using a chainsaw to trim other limbs, one of which broke free and struck the man, causing him to fall to the ground. In North Carolina, Governor Roy Cooper announced that an 85-year-old man from Columbus County died after falling off a ladder as he was preparing his home for Dorian. Dorian is still pummeling the Carolinas with flooding, high winds, and tornadoes, though its maximum sustained winds have slightly decreased, once again reducing it to a Category 2.
Get to safety and stay there. Don't let your guard down. This won't be a brush by. Whether it comes ashore or not, the eye of the storm will be close enough to cause extensive damage in North Carolina.
Its center is currently just off coast of South Carolina, but is predicted to reach North Carolina, Virginia, and even Massachusetts, parts of which are now a tropical storm watch Thursday into Saturday.
The United States and China today agreeing to hold another round of trade talks in early October. The announcement comes after each side just imposed a round of tariffs. NTD's Penny Zhou has more.
High-level officials will meet in Washington, and deputy-level discussions will take place this month to lay the groundwork. The stock markets reacted to the news with a surge. The year-long dispute results from an effort from the U.S. to call out China for its decades of trade secret stealing and unfair government subsidies.
They're forcing U.S. companies to turn over their trade secrets, their IPR, their source codes to their Chinese joint venture partners or other Chinese partners.
The bilateral tariffs have now hit nearly 97% of Chinese exports to the U.S. and 70% of U.S. exports to China. Former U.S. Trade Representative Wendy Cutler says the escalation partially comes from some miscalculation.
China, up until 18 months ago, really thought it could just purchase a lot of our stuff and this would be over. And it took them a while to really pivot and to understand that they needed to also address market access and structural issues and deal with an enforcement mechanism.
President Trump is vowing to be much tougher on China if he wins the next election, and Cutler says China is also closely watching where the election is heading.
And that's the calculus that's going on in both capitals now. Who has the upper hand? Who is the leverage? Who can outlast the other?
Trump's tough stance on China has gained bipartisan support from Congress, though businesses that have dealings directly with China are suffering, at least in the short term, from the uncertainty of the next tactics. Penny Zhou, NTD News.
And the U.S. Navy spy plane P-8 Alpha Poseidon flew over the Gulf of Thailand today. It's part of a maritime exercise between the U.S. and the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. And it comes as part of the Trump administration's efforts to counterbalance China's growing assertiveness in the region.
The joint operation involved 8 warships and 4 aircraft from 7 countries and involved over 1,000 personnel. Footage showed the P-8A involved in a board and search drill in which the surveillance plane simulates a search for enemy vessels.
Where we are talking with the surface vessels and providing them coordinates of targets of interest that they may be looking for.
The 5-day multilateral exercise demonstrates Washington's commitment to an open Indo-Pacific, which the U.S. has been promoting to counter China's increasing influence in Asia, including Beijing's territorial claims in the South China Sea. Other Southeast Asian countries have contested China's claims of ownership. The overlap has led to a number of collisions and rammings in the South China Sea.
And the U.S. is giving more aid for Venezuelans who have fled their country due to the economic crisis created by Nicolas Maduro's socialist regime. U.S. officials announced $120 million in additional funding for emergency food and health assistance. Ivanka Trump joined the Administrator for International Development, Mark Green, and Deputy Secretary of State John Sullivan in Colombia yesterday for the announcement. The money will go toward Venezuelan refugees living in Colombia, Ecuador, Brazil, and other countries in the region. Some 4.3 million Venezuelans have fled their country as its economy continues to spiral out of control. According to the U.S. State Department, 94% of households there were living in poverty last year. And 30-year-old country singer Kylie Ray Harris died in a car crash in New Mexico yesterday. The singer died in a three-way car crash in Taos, New Mexico. Another driver, who was just 16, was also reportedly killed in the crash. The third driver was uninjured. And in New York, today, lawmakers scrutinizing a plan to shut down one of the largest jail complexes in the country. The plan includes building 4 smaller jails in communities, and this isn't sitting well with some New Yorkers. NTD's Miguel Moreno has more on prison reform.
Besides shutting down the jail complex on Rikers Island, the city has proposed replacing all existing jails in New York City with smaller, safer ones in each borough except Long Island. The complex holds thousands of inmates and has gained notoriety for its violence and corruption. While many agree that Rikers needs to be shut down, some are saying that the city didn't communicate well enough with communities.
To me, this plan is very outdated, it's archaic, it's dangerous. A vertical jail will put more people in danger than the city claims it will save.
Kong also said that the city should invest more money in mental health and other community programs. Another concern is that the problem at Rikers may be carried over into the new jails rather than addressing the issue of recidivism.
Let me just add that I am hoping that through this process that once again there's a real commitment around the programming, because this is supposed to be about rehabilitation and connecting folks once they get off the island.
And outside, protesters who were blocked from entering City Hall chanted for the closure of Rikers, but also to stop the creation of new jails.
When we say that we don't want jails, we want funding for education to address harm outside of the normal punishment system.
This discussion on jail reform has been going on for over 2 years. This Tuesday, the City Planning Commission ruled in favor of the initiative, and in mid-October, the council will decide what happens to the jail. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
And San Francisco, they're going to choose a new district attorney in November for the first time in 8 years. NTD's Eileen Eng brings us the latest debates from the candidates.
What will you do to change that policy?
Homelessness, theft, and feelings of insecurity are some of the issues San Francisco residents brought up to the candidates running for district attorney.
For the first time in 8 years, San Francisco residents can vote for a new district attorney. Tonight here at the debate, they raised questions about safety in the city.
It's designed to be fair.
The public should have the right to see their candidates and not be influenced by the media or anything else. They should have the right to make a decision of themselves.
I found it really inspirational to hear kind of the story of each of them and their different approach to what matters to them.
Chesa Boudin promised to treat every arrest as an opportunity for improvement.
I want to make sure that every victim of every crime has a voice, that we're reaching out, contacting victims within 48 hours of initiating our case. I want to make sure that we're not letting dangerous people back on the streets just because they pay bail or have some other connection to power.
Democrat Leif Dausch passes by homeless people on his way to work in the Tenderloin district every day.
I want to take Juvenile Hall, which the city is shutting down because it's 80% empty, and turn that into a mental health justice center, a place for people on our streets who are severely mentally ill to get the help they need.
Democrat Nancy Tung highlighted her years of experience as a prosecutor.
My independence really is about making sure that we do the right thing, no matter if it's politically unpopular, but really servicing the community and making sure there's a just outcome for victims.
Another concern was how candidates would deal with criminals who are protected under Proposition 47. which reduces penalties for some crimes if the losses do not exceed $950.
People now are stealing up to $950 worth of merchandise, but that also hurts our merchants, particularly small businesses who aren't able to absorb the cost.
Rather than changing the law, Tung said they can work on changing the way people are prosecuted by taking the case to the grand jury to let it proceed as a felony.
Our district attorney has not prosecuted anyone, hardly anyone, over the last 8 years. And this is why we have the crime spree that we have.
Dausch promised to make the cases transparent for the public.
Putting millions of data points up on our website about what's actually happening to the cases that we're prosecuting, who's being convicted, what the sentences are, who's coming back into the system. And that's the information that the public needs, that journalists need, that other officials need to hold me accountable. I'm committed to doing that.
The fourth candidate running for district attorney, Democrat Susie Loftus, wasn't present for the debate. All speakers said they would cooperate with the police and community to solve the problems together. Eileen Ng, NTD News, San Francisco.
And the U.S. Department of Education has levied a record $4.5 million fine against Michigan State University. U.S. Education Secretary Betsy DeVos ordering the fine over the Larry Nassar scandal at the university. It cited the school's systemic failure to address sexual abuses committed by Nassar. He was the doctor for the school and for USA Gymnastics. In addition to the fine, DeVos ordered MSU to make changes to its handling of sexual assault cases. In response, the university has agreed to a number of fixes, including an overhaul of its procedures for Title IX, the federal civil rights law that bars discrimination on the basis of sex. And in Hong Kong, pro-democracy lawmakers are criticizing leader Carrie Lam's latest comments regarding her decision to withdraw the controversial extradition bill.
Lam said in a news conference Thursday the extradition bill will be formally withdrawn without the need for a debate or a vote. She was repeatedly questioned about why it took her so long to withdraw the bill despite increasingly violent protests, but skirted around the issue.
It is not exactly correct to describe this as a change of mind.
Lam added that full withdrawal of the bill was a decision made by her government with Beijing's backing. When asked why she did not appoint any pro-democracy members to the Independent Police Complaints Council, Lam said she couldn't disclose the appointment procedure. Later that afternoon, Lam left for China's Guangxi province for a business trip. International relations expert Xiaohui Zhou said the decision to withdraw the bill would prevent tensions between Beijing and Washington from worsening after U.S. President Trump linked the outlook for trade talks with China to a resolution of the Hong Kong protests. Withdrawal of the bill meets one of the protesters' 5 key demands, but activists have vowed not to yield until the government fulfills all of them. Wu Zhiwai, chairman of the Democratic Party, said that Lam had already missed her best chance to withdraw the bill, and if she continued to evade the remaining demands, she would only extend the current conflict. Pro-democracy camp convener Claudia Mo criticized Lam for being a broken tape recorder, for failing to apologize to Hong Kongers and address the differences in public opinion.
No, it's her no care about Hong Kong public opinion. Everyone, including her own friends, her own cronies, have advised her that we would need this independent inquiry over police brutality.
Further protests are planned, including on Saturday, another stress test at the airport. NTD News.
And now to the UK, where Prime Minister Boris Johnson is renewing his push for an early general election. Meanwhile, his brother, Joe Johnson, has quit as junior minister, citing a conflict between family loyalty and national interest. NTD's Jane Werrell reports from London.
Brexit continues to grip the UK Parliament. The next general election is scheduled for May 2022, but Johnson says he wants an early election on October the 15th, before the Brexit deadline, which is October the 31st. He's hoping that voters will give him a majority in Parliament, backing his stance on Brexit.
I don't want an election at all. But frankly, I cannot see any other way.
British lawmakers rejected Johnson's plans for an early general election on Wednesday, but the leader of the House confirmed there'll be another vote for it on Monday. By Monday, legislation that would block a no-deal Brexit and is backed by the majority of lawmakers is expected to pass, which means those on the other side of the aisle from Johnson may be more likely to vote in favour of an election. Meanwhile, Boris Johnson's brother has quit as a junior cabinet member and Conservative lawmaker, citing unresolvable tension between family loyalty and the national interest.
It's time to move on, and I've got to get to work. Sorry, I beg your pardon.
21 Conservative lawmakers, including 2 former cabinet members and Churchill's grandson, were banned from the Conservative Party for voting against Johnson.
I'm truly very sad that it should end in this way.
It's been a challenging week for Johnson, who says he'll deliver Brexit, do or die. The general public is split over the Brexit vote, which happened over 3 years ago. The nation voted to leave the EU 52% to 48%, at a high turnout of 72%.
But so far as those people who participated 3 years ago, they ain't changed their minds, and they're now deeply attached to 2 options that are very much very different from each other. And therefore finding a compromise on this issue has proven extremely difficult.
He said some who didn't vote during the referendum may slant more towards remaining in the EU. Public opinion may well be split along Brexit lines rather than traditional party lines. We'll find out if there's a general election. Reporting from London, Jane Werrell, NTD News.
And in France, ministers are calling on companies to get ready for Brexit ahead of the October 31st deadline.
French junior ministers met with business associations in Paris on Tuesday to warn that French companies operating in the UK need to be ready ahead of Britain's possible exit from the EU on October 31st. This includes the scenario in which the UK leaves without a deal in place. The companies involved in importing from and exporting to the UK are also facing challenges, including uncertainty about customs regulations.
Among all French businesses concerned by Brexit, not all are prepared to the same level. For example, a year ago, almost all banks had a plan B in case a hard Brexit happens. They have finalized changes this year to their business structure and client operation, whereas small businesses that employ less than 250 people are struggling to adapt their human and IT resources.
In the event that negotiations between the EU and the UK break down, a hard Brexit would also mean that British companies would no longer have to comply with European standards. But France's European Affairs Minister, Amélie de Montchalin, said a no-deal Brexit won't be the end of the world, and the UK will remain France's closest neighbor to the north.
And in Italy, the Prime Minister and his cabinet were sworn into office today. The new cabinet united 2 political rivals in an unlikely coalition that's expected to improve ties with the European Union.
Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte formally launched his new government in a ceremony at the Prime Minister's office. He will lead a cabinet of ministers drawn primarily from the anti-establishment Five Star movement and the left of Center Democratic Party. Five Star leader Luigi Di Maio was named as foreign minister despite having no experience in international diplomacy. The high-profile position of interior minister went to Luciana Lamborghese, a career civil servant with no political affiliation. After the ceremony, the new cabinet met for its first Council of Ministers, during which they put forward Paolo Gentiloni to be the next Italian EU commissioner. Gentiloni served as Italy's prime minister from 2016 to 2018. His appointment is widely seen as a move to smooth ties with Brussels after months of tension. NTD News.
Foldable phones and TVs that roll up are some of the offerings on display in Germany at one of the world's biggest consumer electronics fairs, the IFA.
The fair opens its doors in Berlin on Friday. Thousands of visitors are expected to descend on the exhibition grounds. The latest gadgets to tempt both trade buyers and members of the public will be on display.
On the one hand, IFA is a trade fair and merchants make deals for the next year. They buy products here. But on the other hand, it's open to the public. Anybody can come here. Thousands of people are expected here over the weekend to have a look at the newest gadgets.
This year's top trends include the connected smart home and 5G. Smartphone suppliers and makers hope 5G will give them a boost as they face a decline in sales this year amid US-China trade tensions. Huawei and Qualcomm are showcasing 5G products, while Samsung is offering a close-up look at a new $2,000 folding smartphone, the Galaxy Fold, that goes on sale in South Korea on Friday.
Samsung is showing a foldable phone display, which goes on sale this month. LG is showing a rollable television, which should be on sale later this year. These devices will be very expensive, but they show the direction we're heading in.
Deutsche Telekom is marketing the Samsung Galaxy 5G and Galaxy Note 10 Plus 5G for early adopters, as well as the Huawei Mate 20X 5G. HTC is showing the 5G hub for home internet use. LG has its rollable television on display. It should be available later this year. Members of the public will be able to take a good look at the device. It disappears into a slim box when not in use. Panasonic is showing a disappearing television set. The company has several of these transparent OLED displays on show. They are framed in wood. The screens look like panes of glass when not in use. IFA runs from September 6th to 11th.
Car makers are taking a pledge to reduce the number of children dying after being left in hot cars. A number of manufacturers are pledging that by 2025, they'll equip all their cars and trucks with rear seat reminder systems to alert drivers after the engine is turned off. The Alliance of Automobile Manufacturers says drivers will be able to see and hear the alerts. Some 20 manufacturers representing almost all light-duty vehicle sales in the United States have taken the pledge. The National Safety Council says on average 38 children die every year in the U.S. from being left in hot cars. That number has already been reached this year. The Alliance warns, however, that these systems are not a replacement for public awareness about the danger of leaving children alone in cars. And for Austria's largest public art installation, a Swiss artist has set up a forest in a football stadium, suggesting that one day nature might only be enjoyed in a zoo-like environment.
Basel-based Klaus Littmann has set up 300 trees in an Austrian soccer stadium as part of an ecological art project. Inspired by a drawing created in 1970 by architect Max Paintner, the exhibition aims to shed light on man's relationship with nature.
When he had this idea that maybe one day we will have only the chance to see nature in a space like this, like a stadium, so that's what we do already with animals in the zoo, that was for me really very, very impressive. And
visitors will only be able to view the forest from the stands in an effort to change people's perspective by putting something familiar into a new context.
For some, this will be a highly symbolic character, or of a philosophical character, like the Tree of Life or the Place of Longing.
The exhibit, titled For Forest, will open Monday, September 9th in Klagenfurt, Austria, and run till October 27th.
And that's all for today's NTD News. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Cindy Drucare.